Back on FT Live, Braun Perzinski, Kratz, and leader of the Players Union, and also for this show, very important, former big leaguer who did some damage for a long time. Tony Clark is joining us right now on FT Live. Tony, how you doing? How you been? And how's your schedule this week?
Hectic.
Yeah.
Hectic, but good. This is one of those periods of time where you're glad to take a break during the middle of the season as a player, and you come to these and you realize you're running around with your head cut off for a bit around a home run derby and around a game, but it's nice to have the entire baseball world, at least a lot of them, all in the same place at the same time. Really nice.
And the schedule we were talking about earlier for the players, too, is wild. Sometimes people will be like, there's the discussion of, oh, did the home run derby, mess up a dude's swing or something? It's like, also, he's running around like crazy over a few days span, and then the season starts up again.
Well, we got to a point where a lot of what the guys do during the time that they're here, we had to literally negotiate for the reason that you just mentioned. Guys would get to the game and all the things that they had going on, realize that there was no time to actually enjoy the festivities with their families who are largely here, and so really had to drill down on a lot of the particulars and things that they were being asked for and about to do while they were here, and move it into a place where, they've got some responsibilities. Obviously, it's the Midsummer Classic, and you're marketing and promoting the game in that fashion, but you've earned the right to be an all-star and enjoy everything around the ballpark and on the field with your family. So we balance it as best we can, but the guys do run around with their heads cut off too.
That sucks, though. You want to be able to enjoy it. The whole point of this is to be able to enjoy it.
That's right.
And the ballpark's the enjoyable part then, no?
No, but even at the ballpark, you have to do,
it's chaotic.
You have to sign 10 million things. You have to do this. It's a rush. You got to do this. You're running around.
Yep.
There's a million things going on, and then you get to the game, and you're exhausted. You're like, gosh, and I got to go try and get a hit off some dude throwing 100. It's just, it's so much. And we've talked about longer all-star break or doing something different.
Yeah.
But a lot of the guys, you go to the all-star game, that's why you see so many guys declining, because they're like, man, I don't need that. I don't need to, especially and Seattle's great, love the city, love the ballpark. But if you're like a Tampa Bay Ray, you got to fly Seattle, fly back to Tampa where because they have their workout when they have to meet with the team to fly to wherever they're going. You never get that. I don't want to call it a vacation, but you get that break that you need.
It's a vacation.
Yeah, look, Lance Lynn was on the other day. We're like, what are you doing? He's like, 4 days boat, don't talk to me, chilling.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
Well, to your point about the travel, we had to negotiate that too into the schedule because guys were leaving games on the East Coast. If we're in Seattle, guys were leaving games on the East Coast late, arriving 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and then having responsibilities when they got here that afternoon. So a lot of the schedule itself had to be adjusted and tweaked to try to get guys in at a decent time to where they got some rest. So to your point, by the time they got done with the All-Star Game facility, they didn't need an additional day or 2 or 3. To catch back up before the start of the second half. So, I had to work through all that.
Isn't that petty that they don't, understand these are humans and, hey, we're getting it? You don't just not sleep. You don't just, isn't that petty? Come on, Tony.
There's a miss. There's a miss. But the idea that we have to have those conversations is a constant reminder that a lot of the decision-making on the other side of the street isn't focused in on the player experience and what it is or might mean to a player coming out of the break, knowing that if you don't get that rest, what that may mean from an injury standpoint. And so, we have to have those conversations constantly.
But without the player, all we're looking at is some immaculate grass. I'm talking the grass. You were out on the field. That grass is awesome.
Yeah.
Nobody's packing the stadium to see the grass grow.
No. And that's why we're able to work through some of the challenges that we have, because at the end of the day, the guys have to be in a good space to do what they do. They're the best in the world at what they do, and they have to be put in the best position possible to do it.
When you see the All-Stars here, because the best players in the sport are here, what are some of them saying to you? Like when you say hi to them, do some of them go right to, hey, can you help me out with this, or can we fix a rule here, or do they ask you for advice? Or is it just more of how's life going? What kind of conversations do you have when you come across the current
really
players?
Run the gamut. I mean, look, the guys have earned this opportunity. More often than not, I'm around. I'm available if the guys want to talk. If they don't, I'm good with that. I don't ever get up on the cage. I know when I played, having folks up on the cage when I'm trying to prep and work, not a big fan of. I was that guy, a little obsessive compulsive that way. So I'm around. Our staff is around. So if guys need anything or their families need anything, we're available to provide that support. And so, yes, the conversations range from how you doing to where's the best spot to grab a bite to eat because I want to disappear for a little bit to, hey, I'd like to get my wife and my kids down for a shot, on the field. Can we help facilitate it? All of those things come up. Otherwise, we just try to give the guys their space and let them enjoy the festivities.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the draft from an entertainment perspective went the other day? We had the MLB draft, it's here. Do you like the timing? And one of my big things I've been calling for is I want to see draft pick trades because I think it would be entertaining for the sport. And I know that a lot of people have written about it and talked about it. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Well, I don't know how far down that rabbit hole you want to go, but we can go.
Yeah.
We have proposed that on multiple occasions. For us, the ability to trade draft picks is a part of the competition dynamic. If a team wants to trade its draft pick and add a veteran player or cash or something that they believe can help their team now, as opposed to a player that might get there at some point in time, they should have the ability to do that. And so we've felt like that and have proposed that going back I don't know how many different CBAs, and it's never been an interest from the other side to have that as a part of the conversation. And look, I said it this morning. I've said it on the record before. Even though I was drafted, I'm not a big draft guy. Maybe it's just because Kurt Flood is constantly pumping through my veins. But the ability for a player to enter our system unrestricted, such that wherever he may want to go, whatever team he may want to play with, or whatever team may want him, that there's a way to navigate that type of system versus you have zero control from day one over where you go and how you enter the system. I feel some kind of way about that. So, putting that to the side, because at this point we're not going to blow up the draft, our draft versus some of the other leagues, the dynamic's just a little bit different. Our system is set up, and rightly so, that when you get drafted, it's going to take some time before we may see you at the big league level. Not everybody, but a lot of those guys. Some of the other leagues, you'll see them on Sunday, or you'll see them on the hard court pretty immediately. So it's a little different dynamic, and I understand wholeheartedly and appreciate that as a player, you're wanting to fulfill your dream of playing professionally. I get all of that, but the timing. Look, my son plays in college, gone through the youth system, and as many conversations as I've had with the amateur sector, appreciate that the timing is not ideal. For all the reasons that many folks know, but we can go down that road too. So a lot of moving pieces there. I understand wanting to make an event. I truly do. And I understand the excitement around the next generation of players entering our system. I get that too. But there are some challenges associated with it and some things that I would otherwise change or adjust. And I say all that truly not being a big fan of the draft in general.
How do we stop tanking? How do we stop teams from I know they put the lottery in, but they're still Oakland. Right? They're not trying. You can't look me in the face and say the Oakland A's ownership is trying this year. Even Kansas City, they're somewhat trying, but they're not on the same level as Oakland. But Oakland's not trying this year. And then they'll say, well, we can get a better draft pick. And then they say, well, we'll put the lottery in, like the NBA has it, right? Where teams just Mark Cuban this year said, we don't want to go to the playoffs. We want to lose, so we get a better draft pick. How do we stop that? And how do we make every team, I don't want to say have to be competitive, but at least try to be competitive, because as a fan base, if I'm an Oakland A's fan, I'm pissed. Obviously they are, with all their stuff, right? But even a Pittsburgh Pirates, the owner's like, well, we're not going to spend because I can make more money by not spending. As a fan of those teams, I'm pissed.
A lot of what we attempted to do at the bargaining table the last round was focused in on that. We had gotten into a world where a team didn't have to be successful to be very profitable. And we've always believed that in a market system in particular, the best way for a team to realize value moving forward is to put the best product they can on the field. The best product's going to include the best players you possibly can, and that's going to bring fans to the ballpark and excitement around the city, and thus benefit the ball club and benefit the other 29 teams as a result of being competitive. And so it's unfortunate that we had to bring that to the table the last round of bargaining. We did. Some things stuck. You mentioned the lottery. That's one of them. A little uncertainty around, I'm just going to lose as many games as possible so I can get the highest pick possible. Some uncertainty there, and you saw a team that actually moved as a result of the system. Not perfect, not ideal, not where we started, but in an effort to get a deal done, found a landing place that at least raised the concern and brought in some uncertainty. But there are a lot of moving pieces in our system that we thought, if they could be addressed, would also be helpful to that conversation. Because you want all 30 teams starting the year believing, hey, my team did certain things to help put us in a position to be successful. And there are a number of ways to do that. It all comes down to having good players on the field. It'll always come down to that. But we tried to interject things into the system that would help. And a lot of them, unfortunately, the other side wasn't as interested in or willing to engage on. So made some progress, not as much as we would like. Still have some concerns. You mentioned Oakland. We track and keep an eye on all that, all with an eye on knowing that if the industry itself is in a position where coming to the ballpark, starting the season, teams are putting their best foot forward, everybody benefits from it.
And that's for the sport also. Everyone should be like, yeah, we want the best entertainment product on the field. Yeah. The fact that you have to be like saying, hey, don't we all want this, right, guys, is weird, honestly.
It's and I shared this at a sit down this morning. Unlike some of the other sports, there's not necessarily a straight line in ours. Yes, you need good players. It'll start and often stop there. But our game is an interesting one where you can win games a number of different ways with a number of different skill sets, and it's one of the things that makes our game beautiful. Now, we've entered a phase in a period of time where they're trying to clone us and make us all the same, whether it's on the bump or whether it's in the box. That dynamic's not ideal. But if we ever get to a place where, and I don't mean to sound like a romantic, or I definitely don't mean to sound old despite the color of my beard, there are skill sets and things that different players can bring to the ballpark at any given time to help you win a game that night. And so if and when it can become a broader part of the conversation, meaning different ways to win ball games, you'll see a lineup 1 through 9 that has different skill sets that allows you to win on any given night, as opposed to what we've seen a lot of over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years, which is the same approach, number 1 through 9, all with an eye on the 3 true outcomes. That dynamic is just not, I don't think, really good for our game. It doesn't speak to the beauty of what our game is and has always been.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you from the entertainment side that is important to us, because we've been on for 4 months. We've had 120 player guest interviews and conversations on this show. Everyone besides me played in the bigs. So how do we continue to well, I'll say it because otherwise AJ would. So I take away his one-liners.
Over under 2.5 times a show.
Yes,
I got you.
So I just took away.
Like, when I was playing, I know.
I never
I
have
knew
said
what
that.
It was.
I never have said that.
When I was getting hits, you know.
Anyway, most importantly, we know, because we're around players for years, how fun, entertaining they are. Not just what they're doing on the field, but conversations with them. And we point to, like we talked about basketball, like even when there's drama, there's good drama. If a player wants to get traded to a team, be on a better team, like those kind of things, they pump that up, right? Those storylines. And also when they talk to players, just getting real conversations. We had Trout on the other day, and it was the best I've ever heard some of his answers talking to us about velocity in the game, how he's recruiting or trying to keep Ohtani, all those kind of combos. That's good for our game. Right. How do we get more of that? And it's the broad question of marketing our sport through the talent of our sport.
The marketing of our sport has been an ongoing conversation for some time. I don't know, and I've said this publicly, that we've done as good a job as a sport as we could, particularly when the climate changed, back decades ago, and moving players more into the forefront of the conversation. I think we've gotten better. I think opportunities like foul territory are part of that equation. Guys are often looking for an opportunity to speak candidly, to talk about the game, and not have to worry about motivations necessarily along the way. And so when they have an opportunity to do it, you get the types of responses from the guys that you get. Being able to have guys talk to guys who have kind of been there, done that is beneficial. Is beneficial. So you don't get a lot of the cookie cutter responses. You can drill down a little bit deeper and truly talk about the game. Because when you pull back the curtain and you hear guys talk about the game, it does get a little romantic, and it is a whole lot of fun to talk about those things. And they are the types of stories, I think, that engage the next generation and excite fans to hear. So the more often we can do that, the better.
We've had guys, this was part of like when we were putting this together, that have said, I'm on autopilot for that post-game interview on the field because I know it's going to be the same 3 questions from someone going like, how did you feel about this? And, you know, and it's 20 seconds of, oh, we're giving it our all, you know, took it pitch by pitch. And we're better than that because we know then we talk to the guys in the clubhouse or, you know, before the next game, and it's a completely different conversation. Or, like, I mean, what was one of our most viral moments
Lance
on
Lynn.
the show? Lance Lynn's a good example.
No,
Pete Alonso, the poop story.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, look, you're always taught over the course of 162 to never get too high, never get too low. And that's also why I think a lot of the interactions are very, very level set and very, very even-handed. But again, as you just mentioned, guys are on autopilot because you know you got to come to the ballpark the next day. You're going to be facing whoever you're going to face, dealing with whatever you dealt with. And I may have been 0 for 4 today, or I may have been 4 for 4, and I've still got to stay here because I got work to do tomorrow. So yeah, oftentimes that's a part of the equation, and I don't begrudge guys for. I did it a lot when I was an active player. But I think kind of to your point and to what we're talking about, giving guys another lane that they can run into, that they feel comfortable offering a little bit more when they feel comfortable doing it, I think that's important because over the course of 162, you are going to have those ups and downs, and you are going to have moments where you're more talkative than you may not otherwise be because you're in the middle of a 3 for 30, whatever it happens to be. Well, let's chat a little bit more in those times that you're feeling comfortable doing it. What are you thinking? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? And when you, like I said, you sit down with a group of guys that has been there, done that, you can start to peel back layers of stuff that you just don't hear about very often, but do so in an environment where guys feel protected and comfortable doing it, and it's not gonna put them in a bad spot when they get to the ballpark the next day.
And the likability factor, like you said, Lance Lynn, so he had a slow start to the season, and he comes on our show, and he's just like, I fucking suck right now. I'm with you people, like, because he's like, I've done it well for a while. What did he say? Fuck my sweeper.
Yeah.
Like he was just going off, and he's like, that's where he feels, that's how he talks, and that's where he wants to air it out. And everyone's responding going like, I can't be mad. I'm a White Sox fan. I can't be mad.
Well, that's who Lance is.
Yeah.
And you got a chance to see it. And it's what's always made him great at what he's done for as long as he's done it. But he felt comfortable enough to offer it here. I tip my hat to him for doing it, and I tip my hat to you guys for giving him the platform and an opportunity to do it.
Thank you.
As a player, I played against you.
Yep.
Right, when you for a while. Is there a moment, kind of, we're gonna let you dig yourself here for a minute, all right? 'Cause I don't know that people remember that you played and you were a really good player.
I appreciate it.
Is there any moment in your career that you're like, that was the coolest thing for me, as because we're all team,
Yep.
we want to win. But is there a moment you look back and say, man, Tony Clark, it was really cool that I just did blank?
You know, it's interesting when I think back to some of those times. So my first game in '95, coming up with Detroit, Sparky Anderson was the manager.
First of all, you couldn't have stood up in Tiger Stadium.
There was no room to stand
You
up.
had to be on your
remember,
knees
yes.
in the
He can barely
dugout.
stand up here.
Dude, the dugouts,
Let's be honest.
First of all, the dugouts in Tiger Stadium were like this high.
Every bit of it.
You hit your head every time.
That's why I invited the guy to the party last night that was 7'5".
Every bit of
So
it.
he wasn't going to be the
Dwarf.
tallest guy.
Coming out to the field, knowing I was walking down the corridor that any number of greats did, getting out on the field, knowing I was standing in the box where Al Kaline stood. That first game I played in '95 was against the Cleveland Indians. And at that point in time, you guys will remember the mid to late 90s with Cleveland. They were an absolute juggernaut. That night, I got down to first base, and Eddie Murray was playing first base. Now, I'm a switch hitter. Obviously, Eddie was a switch hitter. Completely different conversations, but a switch hitter nonetheless. I didn't know how to talk to him, but I knew I was standing next to Eddie Murray. And so got down there, and it was the only thing I could come up with was, Mr. Murray, how are you doing? And ever since that day, it's been Mr. Murray, Mr. Clark, Mr. Murray, Mr. Clark. That same game, Dave Winfield was in, and I grew up watching Dave. So I had an opportunity when Dave got a hit to come down to first base to say hi to Dave Winfield. And so as much as, first hits, first home runs, winning teams, all of those things were neat. Being in the same batter's box on the same field as some of the superheroes that I remember reading about and seeing and growing up with, and then being on the field with some of the guys that I tried to emulate and that I admired, that to me was always one of the coolest dynamics of being a big leaguer, and I was grateful for it as a result.
What about your most embarrassing moment?
Oh gosh, where to start?
Because it's real.
So I tell this story. This is one of them. I don't know if I could put them in pecking order because there were so many of them. But one of them that often stands out to me is we had a Fox. I think it was a Fox Saturday game at the time. Maybe not Fox. I don't want to throw Fox or anybody else under the bus. It was a national game on the weekend, and I had gotten mic'd up for the game. Had never gotten mic'd up before. That particular game, I booted 2 balls, punched out 3 times. It was 0 for 4 with 3 punches. And for me, it was entirely because I had gotten mic'd up during that game. And so ever since then, ever since that game, I refused to get mic'd up because one of the worst games I ever had was with me on having a mic and knowing that everything I said that came out of my mouth, whether I was with somebody or not with somebody, found its way onto somebody's tape deck somewhere. And I'm still waiting for it to come out. But that was one of the most embarrassing games for me that I can recall.
We've all been there. Mic'd up or unmic'd up, we've all been there. Trust me. It had nothing to do with the mic. Sometimes there's days like that.
Yeah, but it made me feel better to think it was the mic's
Of course,
fault and not me.
it's never you.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
That's why people say
me.
baseball
Right.
players are superstitious. Well, not exactly. We just want to have a routine. So that way if we have a bad day, we say, oh, I messed up my routine. Let's get back to my routine.
Right.
And everything will get right because
Right.
the season's so long. It's not really superstitious. It's just mentally it makes us how we.
Well, somebody once told me we're not superstitious, we're a little stitious.
A little stitious.
That's right,
Yeah.
a little stitious.
That's the line.
I'm with you.
So Tony, you're a big dude. How tall are you?
6'7".
6'7". Oh, it's the same height, I think, as Ellie De La Cruz, who I've talked about a lot on this show. He's not here.
No.
But you don't even know what I'm asking.
I know what you're gonna
No,
ask.
I'm not. I'm not asking
Oh.
what you think
He
I'm
was
asking.
gonna ask if you
This
should
is
be
a
an
bigger,
All-Star. I said
no,
no.
this is a bigger picture question. How do we get more skill sets of Ellie De La Cruz into Major League Baseball? And I know that's a loaded question too, but I worked for the league for a long time and we'd throw out all kinds of scenarios, but I want to get your perspective on how we can get super freak athletes like him that clearly he would be a good, probably if he grew up in the States, football or basketball player, but instead he's a baseball player coming from where he's coming from. How do we figure that out? Because watching him play is great for our game.
100%. I think it goes to what story baseball wants to be able to tell. In other words, we've had conversations too with the league about 2 sports stars and guys that do have options to play other sports. How do you get them to focus in on baseball? Mm-hmm. Well, when you're entering the system a certain way, when the value prop associated when you enter a system is a certain way, without diving too deep into what I believe is a broken development system, that's a whole nother conversation. It depends on what type of story baseball wants to tell to attract those types of players. We get them every now and then, not as often as we would otherwise like, and when you see them, they jump off the page in a way that's tremendous for our game, in ways to grow it and have it spread. We used to get more of those guys. But again, I talked a little bit about this, but as the landscape has changed and shifted, we haven't done, I don't think, all we could do as an industry to engage, breathe into, provide support for, and encourage the next generation of superheroes that are like that. And look, our game is humbling. And I pray Ellie continues to do what he's doing and continues to grow and develop as a player. Because if he does, we all benefit for it. But the glitz and glamour around some of the opportunities in some of the other sports is an allure to a lot of those top athletes that's hard for baseball to overcome right now with the story that we're telling. Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful that as each next Ellie becomes a part of the day-to-day conversation, that more and more guys continue to see baseball as an avenue that they want to explore. Look, I thought basketball was going to be where I was going. I had back surgery my freshman year. I was just never the same. Let me focus in on baseball and see how this works. I'm grateful for how things turned out. But if you had forced me at 10, 12, 13, 14 years old to make a choice, I likely would have chose basketball. I wouldn't have chose baseball. And so the story we've got to tell has got to reach down as far down as it can reach down. And the opportunities we got to provide for guys who have that type of skill set needs to be a little bit different, I think, than what we're saying at the moment.
Like, how can we incentivize them? So, for example, here's a more recent example. Kyler Murray, right, gets picked in the first round, ends up deciding to be a quarterback. He's making tons of money. He's not one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, and we don't get to see him ever try to be a baseball player, and he's a sick athlete. How can we entice? He's like, I'm going to make crazy money right from the jump. We can't do that here right now. Dudes are under control for 6-7 years, and yeah, you can maybe sign an early extension like Julio has done, but how do we get Kyler to be like, hey, give this a shot, even if you do both, and I don't know if that's possible. Like, what is the answer? Is there incentivization to do that?
Well, we've had a couple guys that have done both.
Yeah.
But they weren't quarterbacks. And the dynamic around the quarterback position, I think, is a little more unique than an outfielder or an infielder may otherwise be. But your point is a valid one. And creating flexibility, incentives in the way the structure is built up and leads to you signing, we've proposed flexibility to try to attract more and more of those guys who have those options. They haven't quite landed yet. We're going to continue to propose them and continue to try to engage on them. But that's part of the what story can we tell to that player to say, hey, you go this route, here are the benefits if you do. A lot of that story has been the longevity of your career. For baseball is often different than the other sports. The idea that when you're done playing, you should be able to stand upright and walk away from the game in a way that physically you may not be able to as well, or you might not be able to as well in some of the other sports. So that's always been a part of the equation. But when you start talking about opportunity, when you start talking about financial benefits, the dynamic starts to shift a little bit. And so, look, I think it's multi-layered, multifaceted, but I do think there are ways reaching down into the system to engage the next generation of superstars in a way that's a little different than what we do now.
I mean, he's teaching me a lot about NIL right now because he's a big college baseball guy. I think it could be helpful. Do you?
Yeah, but the problem is, yeah, it could be helpful getting kids to play, but football is paying kids in college. And what they see in basketball, what they see is I can jump right from college where I'm getting paid right to the NFL, right to the NBA. Whereas baseball, they're like, man, I still got to grind, right, in the minor leagues. So these kids, like Paul Skeens, he was at LSU, he was making, who knows, we don't know the number. It's a big number. Then he signs for whatever he's going to sign for. And then he goes to the minor leagues, he's making $800 a month. And you're like,
well, that's agreed.
And think about it, and I'm not saying Paul Skeens is probably a bad example. Let's take a above average college player, probably making a decent amount at his NIL, whatever it is, and then he goes in the minor leagues, doesn't sign for a lot. He's got, and he schleps it for 3-4 years in the minor leagues. Then he gets to the big leagues. Yeah, the minimum is great, but then it takes you 3 years to get to arbitration, 3 more years to get to free agency.
That's all staying healthy.
That is not. It's hard. It's hard to look at when you can play, if you're a super athlete and you can go, I can go play 1 year in college basketball, get drafted in the first round and get $40 million off the jump.
And help your family right away.
Yes, and the NFL, same way. Like Kyler Murray's like, okay, I can play minor league baseball, or the Cardinals are going to give me $50 million. I'll give back my $2 million to the A's, and I'll take my 48. And I mean, it's a system, but I don't know how we change the system.
No,
I don't think
you're 100. I can't disagree with anything that you said, and that's why a lot of what we're trying to interject into the system is providing a little more flexibility in that regard. And like I say, it just depends on what kind of story you want to tell. Look, and it's not easy, and I think I mentioned earlier, there's no straight line, meaning you play 100 games in the minor leagues, and by 101 you're going to be a big leaguer. It doesn't work that way. But to the extent that you've got some of these other benefits, and to the extent you can tell a story from the outset, that day one, that even if you have to go this route, here's the value proposition on the front end, and if you do end up here, here's what it looks like on the back end. That may be a little different than the story we tell now. Yeah, there's value to that. And a lot of what you may recall from the last round of bargaining was trying to move value earlier to guys in their careers. One of those things we had, again, it's crazy to think that we had to negotiate it, but when you hear about service time manipulation, not only is getting to the minor leagues and trying to get through it a challenge, trying to be in a position where you're not having your service time manipulated so that you get to arbitration and the points in time in your career where you otherwise could or should as a result of what you've done to that point. We had to negotiate those things in there to try to lessen that likelihood so that when you are ready, perhaps it's more likely than not that you do get that call-up when you should get that call-up, as opposed to it being manipulated to try to push out your control longer. So again, there are conversations and things that have been around for a long time, but a lot of what we did was trying to remove some of it such that the next guy in the next conversation sees the system as fairer than it may have been before. Excuse me.
One more fan question, because I promised them I would get one in there. And we have a lot of, there are an above average amount of A's fans in baseball. I'll phrase it that way. So Sean said, thoughts about, I know we touched on a little bit, but thoughts about the A's abandoning Oakland, one of the most diverse cities with deep roots in black culture, hometown, of Ricky Henderson, Dave Stewart, and naming a bunch of names after that.
Well, Stu has offered comments publicly as well. I mentioned to somebody the other day, I've got family in Sacramento that I often had a chance to see, that I very rarely had a chance to see when I came through and played in Oakland. It's disheartening to see what we're seeing and the effect that it's having on the community there. Obviously, we as players and as a union, we're a part of the conversation, not a part of the relocation, not a part of the decisions necessarily that are being made, but we have a formal seat at the table that stems from what's going on. But the idea that a team may very well be, it hasn't happened yet, but may very well be leaving Oakland and going to a market that's smaller is an interesting one. The idea that one of the most, you have a headline that suggests you're concerned about diversity and inclusion, but then you're removing yourself perhaps from a community that is as diverse as any in this. It's concerning. And I know the fans there, we feel for them, the players that are there who are grinding every day amid the chaos that's out of their control as well, is something that we stay connected to and are concerned about. But as I've said privately, I'll say publicly, whatever's going to happen there needs to happen sooner rather than later, because it's a conversation that's been ongoing now for as long as I can remember, that we need some conclusion to try to move forward from. I just wish it didn't and wasn't manifesting itself in the way that it is right now. Yeah, we have players on that are like in group chats, right, with like a lot of the former players, because they had a great run recently as a team too, with like Olsen and Chapman and all those guys, and they text about it. Bassett's been on with us, so it's great to get your take. Thanks for swinging by. Good to see you.
Hold on, before you go,
thanks for having me.
Quick answer. Is the game in a better place now than when you took over?
I think we're moving in a better direction now than when we were back in the day. And I say that in large part because our players are remarkably gifted. I'd like some folks and some decision makers to get out of the way and let us do what our players are capable of doing. But we're better today than we were yesterday, and I'm hopeful that we'll be better tomorrow. I truly do.
Cool. Perfect.
Love that. Thank you, Tony. Great to see you.
No, I appreciate you. Thanks
Enjoy
for having
the game tonight.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.